Awesome, guys. Well, thanks for coming. Yeah, I think we can go around the horn on some quick intros. I can start off. I'm John. I'm an investor at Coinfund. We're a crypto investor that does lead checks, pre-seed to Series B. Focused a lot on AI, so we've invested in many of the companies that have presented today, including Jensen, Perle, as well as Giza, and others, including Prime Intellect and Pluralis and Bagel. Recently, we've spent a bunch of time in the robotics ecosystem. There's a lot of really exciting stuff going on in the intersection of crypto, AI, and robotics, and that's what we're going to talk about today. Yeah, great. I'll pass it on to Bayley to give a quick intro on himself.
Yeah, hey everyone, great to be here. My name is Bayley. I'm the CEO and co-founder of PrismaX. I've been a longtime robotics researcher since 2012, and believe it or not, an even longer time crypto enthusiast. I mined my first Bitcoin when they were like $1 and sold all my Bitcoins and used them to buy lunch, so such is life. But I've been in the space for a long time, and it's really exciting to see these two things come together and see how crypto and decentralization and all this scalability can really help empower robotics and help it move forwards.
Hey everyone, I'm Arthur. I'm the CCO here at Perle, where we're building the
Hello. I'm Don Johnson, aka Chris from Virtualist Protocol. We've been building for about 4 years, and in the past probably year have really made a large move into robotics. We're developing products ourselves. We're investing in very cracked teams like Bayley over there at PrismaX, and also have a number of agents that are building in the space. So excited to talk robotics with you guys.
Awesome. So can start pretty general here. What are the theses, this is kind of for everyone here, what are the theses that really got you interested in this intersection of crypto and robotics, and what continues to get you excited there?
I think for us, it's this idea that in order for robotics to take off, you're going to need 100 million people behind the scenes doing things like data collection and distribution and maintenance and all of these crazy things beyond just the AI model design and hardware manufacturing. And to us, if you want to do that, if you want to go get 100 million people excited about something completely new, crypto is an incredible way to do that. The other great thing is that we have this whole the sum of the value of the sum of all the parts is greater than the sum of the values of the individual parts, right? For things like data collection, an individual hour of data is worth nothing, but together 100 million hours of data will really it changes how humanity will interact with the world, and all that just makes it seem like a really great fit for decentralization in crypto.
Yeah, I think similarly to what Bayley here mentioned, our industry is, especially in data annotation, it requires a large number of annotators and humans contributing their knowledge to data. And I think crypto for us was the best solution when we think about how can we coordinate, millions or tens of millions of people acting in their best interest and still, allowing them to work in the best interest of the network.
Just to sort of add on to what they're saying, like our background's in gamification, right? And so, we started initially because we believed, gaming, Web3 gaming was going to be big. And specifically what Bayley, you guys are talking about the data contribution and bringing everything on chain it just makes sense with robotics.
Great. This one's for Arthur and Bayley. What are some of obviously you guys operate in a lot of like the data collection space here, and that's a lot of what's really interesting right now in the intersection of crypto and robotics. What are some of the main issues you've encountered? Like in theory, I think it makes a lot of sense, to use crypto to incentivize people to contribute data to this network. What are some of the issues that you guys have encountered that you guys are working through?
I think what I've historically seen is there's been a bit of misalignment between the crypto side and the demand side on what data is actually being collected. There's a lot of nuance to being able to actually take this data and either make it meaningful for model training or sell it for model training. And over the past 18 months, 2 years or so, I've seen the narratives and the strategies actually evolve significantly. So we're a good example, right? If you've known us for a very long time, you knew that when we first started, we were really focused on egocentric tax data. And since then, we've shifted a lot more to teleoperation and remote control of robots, simply because that's better aligned to what the market needs. The first one sounds like it makes a lot of sense. It's super scalable. It can be passively collected. Everyone has access to it. But in the end, you do have to go build a business surrounding this data. And if you can't really find an immediate buyer, then that becomes challenging. Which is not to say ego data isn't valuable. We're piloting some egocentric data collection with virtuals, and it is interesting and very scalable. But it's just a matter of aligning the commercial horizons has been always challenging.
Yeah, I think one of the big things we spent a lot of time thinking through is how we incentivize quality data contributions instead of just raw quantity. I think one of the things about crypto is that it's very, easy to incentivize often the wrong behavior. So I think we've spent a lot of time sort of researching and testing how we can make sure that we're only incentivizing quality data that actually moves the needle in model training, and not just making sure that we get these massive useless data sets.
I'll just add something to it. I mean, I think we see a lot of really talented teams building in the space, but maybe they have a very strong robotics background or a very strong AI background. But some of the key pieces that seem to be missing from a lot of the teams is that data monetization. So yeah, as teams are growing, they're adding those aspects to the team, and then I think learning really how to capitalize on it.
Yeah, great. I think maybe expanding on this topic, again, in theory, kind of this data collection using crypto to immediately incentivize people makes a lot of sense. But to talk a little bit more about the business side here, like who are the customers you guys are selling to? What do they want? What do they need? Obviously, it's very early, I think, but like, what is the kind of economics and business side looking for this data layer here in terms of selling to those end customers?
Yeah, happy to go first here. I think we're working with some of the largest frontier labs, governments, as well as just general people using AI for internal use cases. And I think it's really hard to say what they're looking for. It really varies project to project, I think. We've seen everything from like audio collection all the way to really detailed, looking for math, like Olympic math champions to do really complex math evaluations. And we've seen everything in between.
Yeah. I get the occasional spam from Meta asking me to annotate math problems. So I know that field well. For us, it's a very clearly defined sector of U.S.-based robotics labs, research teams, and companies that have lots of capital to be able to build out their projects, but don't really have access to the sort of scalable labor required to do the data collection. Right? If you look at these teams, there are teams of 20, 30 PhDs. They're incredibly well funded, but fundamentally, these people they don't know how to handle the orchestration of hundreds or thousands or tens of thousands of people to do data collection. Things like quality really go downhill if you're too passive about it. And I think that's really where crypto strengths lie, right? Like this industry is extremely familiar with like dealing with attacks and Sybils and people trying to game the system, bots, farming, and making sure that all the incentives and mechanisms are built in a way that you do get what you want in the end. And it's a far cry from just like hire 1,000 people off of a gig labor platform, pay them $20 each, and expect them to actually do the work that you asked them to do. This doesn't actually work in practice. You get 20,000 hours of garbage, fire the fleet, and start over. But obviously, as we all know, there's a much better way to do these things.
Yeah, I think Bayley hit on it, but universities are also, I think, a big target customer.
Yeah, it makes sense. And so, yeah, Don, would love to kind of jump into your side here. Obviously, people know virtuals for different things than robotics generally. So would love to hear you talk a little bit about what virtuals is building over in robotics space.
I mean, I think most people know us for the Launchpad, right? Robotics is a big focus of ours now. I think in crypto, a lot of times you have just people pivot. I mean, we did it ourselves for years. It's pivot after pivot after pivot. The Launchpad is like a core aspect of our business, but our move into robotics is not like a pivot away from that. It's like a key pillar of what we're doing. So we're, like I said earlier, we're investing in really crack teams, but we also have a lot of teams building in robotics that have launched with us previously. So I think like Ego Play would be like a good example. They launched as Vader like over a year ago. They were actually one of the first agents that launched on our platform. But now like we internally, and I think a lot of teams in the landscape see the AI agents being embodied in these physical forms. And as Bayley and Arthur hit on, like the data contribution is key there. So you have a lot of teams. The Vader team would be a good example that have taken their background in gamification and really created something that can drive tens of thousands, of customers on a daily, weekly basis to contribute, valuable data.
Awesome. I think moving on to kind of the data piece here, and I think this is something we as investors have been thinking about a lot at Coinfund in terms of what the bottlenecks are in robotics, specifically for humanoids. Obviously, humanoid robotics has been something a lot of companies have been working towards for a long time, and data is definitely one of the bottlenecks, but there's others as well, and there's also like non-humanoid robotics that is kind of competing with that humanoid robotics niche. So I guess to start off, what do you think are the main bottlenecks to mass adoption of robotics today, and where do you think the data piece falls in that spectrum of bottlenecks?
I think a monstrous bottleneck that people really tend to ignore because it's like not a technical one is pricing. If you think about it, if the robot were free, you would go bring it into your home no matter what it did. And then if the robot were $1 million, it doesn't matter what it does, you wouldn't buy it. So along the sliding scale, there's this whole pricing game, and it's very important because pricing is very strongly tied to capabilities, right? There's no bad product, there's no bad function, only a bad price for a product. So if your thing doesn't do enough and it's too expensive, then it's really hard to find commercial traction. And that sort of ties into the whole data problem. Because the robots themselves have like a fairly high fixed base cost due to the fact that they're physically huge pieces of hardware, people expect high functionality, and that high functionality means you need to be able to scale the underlying data sets to train the models and give them the smarts to be commercially viable. Ergo, you need huge data sets that are very diverse and have broad coverage. You can't just ship a robot into the public and then people are like, well, it doesn't work in my house because nothing like it was ever in the pre-training data set. And I think that's sort of where, at least for a lot of us in this space, I think that's where the crypto aspect really kicks in. If you defer the design of these data collection scenarios to the community, you can drive organic diversity, which is almost impossible to do from a centrally managed plan. Like if you go talk to even the really, really big research labs about what their data collection strategy is, they're basically, yeah, we have the employees write down data collection scenarios, then we go build them, but like 30 people are not going to be able to describe every possibility in the world, so you eventually wind up with a bit of collapse in the training. So these two are tied hand in hand, right? Like it was easier with LLMs because the LLMs cost nothing to ship once you've built them, so you could have a relatively low functioning system and still be able to ship. With robotics, there's just a super high bar to be able to ship anything at all because you're asking people to pay $30,000 for the hardware.
You know, something also like I learned from like listening to Bayley speak before, you know, you talk about all we're seeing on the timeline is humanoids, right? But I remember Bayley telling me once, you know, like basically you attempt to build a humanoid if you're looking to raise money from a VC. Right, because that's like sexy, okay? But you know, you learn really when you start listening to like the experts talk. Like, you know, robotics isn't just that like humanoid that you see like on your your crypto timeline. And you know, Bayley can go into like just the significant cost and development and all of that stuff on a humanoid level. You know, for the vast majority of robotics companies, like doesn't make sense.
Yeah, I think succinctly the legs will triple the cost of your robot. And if you go look at all of the demos on Twitter, very few of them even have the robot move. So forget about the legs, right? Why are we even like making the robots mobile at all? The figure demo is like a good example. It's just the top half of the robot sitting in front of a table moving packages, but they proudly advertise that it's a bipedal robot. And I think the simple answer is if you show up with 2 arms and a desk, the VCs won't write you a check because you're like bad and boring. But if it like jumps around and does a backflip, people are like, wow, it's so cool. Here's some seed funding.
I remember Bayley one time telling me, we were talking about robots, humanoids walking upstairs, right? And he basically said, you know, it would be cheaper to make each step of the stair an arm as opposed to actually like have the humanoid, you know, walk up the stairs itself.
So interesting. One of the things there I wanted to ask about is, I think one of the reasons why humanoids have been like more attractive from a surface level perspective is that training piece of, you know, we have humans, they can train robots using kind of, you know, watching what they do. And so you can get much more data than you could on a completely different looking physiology. So curious, like, is that something that you guys like have taken advantage of in terms of like more humanoid-like robotics versus some other industries which have less humanoid-like robotics, which won't allow you to incentivize people to train that data as easily?
So I guess it's important to like think about the definition of a humanoid, right? To like people who are actually in the field, humanoid means anything with 2 arms that has the rough degrees of freedom and like physical size of a human being, and the bottom half is sort of agnostic. If you go look at all the hardware vendors over in Asia, they're advertising like 2 arms on a like push cart as a humanoid robot, and I think that's important because, as you said, it would be very difficult to train a robot that was wildly different from a human configuration. there would be no way to collect the data. And right, like even for something as simple as, I don't know, like a very fast self-driving car or drone, that kind of data is really difficult to collect compared to just doing things, completing tasks, because it requires immense amounts of skills to be able to handle the novel configurations. And there are obviously a lot of reasons. The original argument behind humanoids was that the spaces around us are built for human-like, human-shaped, human-sized objects. So by making the robots roughly fit into the footprint and capabilities of a person, you can sort of have them drop into your existing spaces. And these are all really good arguments for why the top half of the robot should look like a person. The debate really is on like whether the robot should have legs right now, and I think the answer is just a resounding no.
And you also think about just the transportation of these robots, you know, like carrying around a little box is a little different than, you know, trying to bring a coffin someplace.
Have you ever tried to ship a full-size humanoid? We had one show up in a 10-foot-long coffin.
Just going to the airport with that, like you get all sorts of...
So bad.
Yeah, like I get bad looks when I bring my bicycle to fly. Like think about bringing the coffin-looking thing. Yeah,
Definitely getting a second screen on that one. So yeah, I guess jumping into like different methods of training. So I think you guys focus a lot on teleoperation. There's some startups we've met that kind of go as simple as a smartphone for capturing kind of certain types of data. How do you guys think about like, you know, the ways that you train robots? Why are you guys focused on teleoperation? Why are maybe you guys focused on different methods? How do you guys think about that spectrum?
It's a really curious thing. If you've known us long enough, we were originally focused on the whole smartphone thing. Basically, the argument is like very clean that if you go do vision data only training, you can scale it infinitely very quickly because it's passive. But it turns out the problem is, I think the real issue is that vision data is too diverse, right? If you go have 1 million people go randomly collect videos of themselves doing things in their kitchen, you get like 1 million completely different kitchens, and there isn't enough of any pattern, any modality for the model to like learn meaningful things. So if you want to do everything through pure vision, you need a ludicrous amount of data. It's like similar once again to language modeling, where the weaker the training objective, the more data you need in order to learn the patterns. The stronger the training objective, the less data you need. And because we're in a fairly early stage in the space, teleoperation to me, teleoperation isn't that it's like collected on a real robot or you get the joint angles. What's really happening is you're saying, I have these 7 robots and I demand the data be from one of these 7 types of robot, and that forces a collapse of the data distribution, which allows the models to converge much more quickly, right? The like most extreme example are the toy models that the like Hugging Face guys will train, where they go teleoperate a robot for about an hour and then go fine-tune a model that was trained only on data from that robot in order to complete tasks. And like you can get meaningful task completion within an hour of data, versus if you tried to do it through pure vision, it would be a like 1,000-hour task to be able to even complete a simple task. So I think that's the reason. I think there will be a shift in priorities and a shift in training paradigms as the industry begins to mature. But right now, you just, as I said earlier, you have to align with what the industry is going against and what people's like research timelines look like. Researchers don't have 3 years to wait before they start training.
Yeah, I would almost take the opposite answer there. I think a lot of the requests we've gotten from a lot of the big, you know, labs or robotics companies have been for very, very diverse, you know, massive data sets, a lot of which is collected through, you know, phones and video.
Bayley, do you have any response there? Like, are you kind of serving different customers? Like, what do you think is the disparity coming from?
So I think very research-focused teams are more likely to go work on vision data. It's everyone agrees it is the new frontier for training. It's just hard to get commercially viable results, right? Like, if you go look at most notably Meta and NVIDIA, Meta had an experiment where they trained a robotics model on pure ego video, and like it was okay. NVIDIA's model GR00T is about 60% ego video, and it's also pretty okay. But the bulk of the like whatever pies and skills and 1x's of the world are training on direct data. And the problem with working with the research teams is that NVIDIA is not particularly interested in like spending a ton of money on data, because for them, anything which isn't building a GPU or writing CUDA is just like it's a side thing to promote the ecosystem. So you're going to be able to maybe like sell $1 million of data. You're not going to be able to like go and continuously get revenue out of NVIDIA. That's just not their priority. And the same for like Meta doesn't pay for data. Obviously, they're a data mine themselves. Yeah, so I think there's a gap between the frontier, like the most frontier research, and the people who are like working on this as very commercially.
I think like we see that too. I mean, a lot of times, these companies are having to move really quickly. Bailey's been around the space for a long time. I think a lot of times they just go for the low-hanging fruit. Everyone here has a cell phone, realistically, with a camera. So when you're trying to start out and onboard tens of thousands of users, that's an easy way to do it. But when you talk to the real like scientists here, they're pushing different frontiers.
Yeah, it makes sense. In terms of maybe just zooming out really broadly on the robotics landscape, I think, again, as VCs, one of the things we're thinking about is which of the pieces of the robotics space, whether it's data, making the actual robots themselves or the robotics model, is actually most valuable. You guys operate a lot on the data side of things, so I assume you guys have a lot of opinions on why that's very valuable. But yeah, just curious, like, what you think about where the value splits between those few categories.
I mean, I think one thing you didn't mention was distribution.
Yeah.
So like I think that's like a big area as well.
Yeah, let's see. I have a perhaps strong and unpopular opinion about this. So I think that data is tantamount to the model right now. Like it's if you go look at the model training pipeline, it's so overwhelmingly limited by data that it no longer makes sense to invest in actually training the model. If you gave me the data, I could find you someone to train the model. If you start as a model company with no data, I don't care how many PhDs you have, you're not getting anywhere. So I think if you're interested in like the modeling side, focusing on efficient data pipelines and efficient use of data is much more important than saying like I have a cool new model architecture. I think that the complete robots themselves are almost uninvestable right now. I don't think it's that like robots are bad or robots are hard. I think there are too many companies building robots and there isn't enough signal. Like if I come to you and like, hey bro, I have a humanoid, that literally says nothing. There's like 10 other companies with humanoids and it's too easy to just tell a story of why my humanoid is better, right? If I have 2 humanoids, I can go say them in production. I can go like pay for pretty paint, et cetera, et cetera. I think where there's some real money is one level below if you're interested in hardware. At the actuator level, there's a big bottleneck right now that while there are a lot of companies building actuators, most of them are very Chinese. And what that means is that they'll do things like change the firmware protocol on you without letting you know, resulting in a month of downtime as you receive your new batch of actuators and wonder where your design fell apart. So I think being able to like really push for better productization and more efficient, like just sort of put togetherness at the component vendor level is super important.
But Bailey, start with humanoids, raise money, and then make the pivot, right?
Yeah. The Chinese companies actually work in the opposite direction. They start with an actuator, raise money, and then switch to humanoids. It's really weird. Like they started with a perfectly good business and then pivoted to like one which continuously bleeds money at an incredibly high speed. But to Don's point, I think logistics and distribution is going to be a huge one. Once again, if you've ever picked up a full-size humanoid, this is like, it's the same distribution problem as like trying to invent the car dealership. Like this is a big boy. It's heavy, it's dangerous, it needs education, it needs financing, and there's gonna be a whole ecosystem surrounding this.
When you think about Bailey, it's like, you think about Ford, right? Bailey's like the Shelby, right? Like he's making like the highest performance, the best performing cars, but then all of a sudden you need to rely on the bigger company to do the distribution.
Yeah, cool. Maybe to cap us off here, more of a fun question, which is particularly fun in this category since there's so much things that can happen and people are really enjoying thinking about it right now. If you had to make one prediction that sounds crazy today, but you think will look obvious in a 5-year time horizon in embodied robotics, what would it be? I'll start with you, Bailey.
I think in 5 years, robots will be everywhere, but you might not see it. It's sort of like IoT, right? It was all the rage back in 2013. Like if you were like in the hardware space or a VC back in like 12, 13, IoT was the hot shit. You don't hear people talk about it, but look around this room. It's everywhere. Every device in this room is smart. Every device in this room has a network connection and is connected to a phone.
Even the refrigerators.
Yeah. And I like honestly, those like light bars over there probably have some sort of Bluetooth app. And I think that's going to be the same thing for robots. In 5 years, you're going to have all kinds of appliances and machines in your life that they do things on their own. You can talk to them and they do things on their own. But it's going to be like well-designed, clever products, so it just feels natural. Like you type in natural language and the machine goes off and like moves around.
Bailey, when are there going to be more robots than humans?
You know, the 5 years might not be too far away if you have a loose definition of robot. Like if robot is anything with intelligence that has a moving part.
Because we talk a lot about when are there going to be more AI agents with on-chain wallets than humans. We actually have like an internal like team competition going on. We're super degen, right? I'm at like under 3 years.
Yeah.
I think that's
so.
perfectly possible. Yeah.
Also, something that people don't really like, looking back, they'll realize is that, people are doing this data contribution for like self-driving cars, humanoids, these like larger tasks. But like what we've actually seen, like feedback, and these guys probably know it better than I do, but the really valuable data is in like the niche stuff. So it's in pornography, it's in feeding pets. It's not so much in, washing the dishes.
Yeah. I think to your point, like collecting data for single fixed functions that people are useful will result in like really useful tools that people will buy. People might not be able to afford a $30,000 humanoid, but if you had like an arm which did things and you could set on your kitchen counter as a third hand, I think a lot of us would pay a couple $1,000s for
We don't want everything done in the
we
don't want everything done in the kitchen though.
Yeah.
The thing too is like even with the LLMs, like everyone's always talking about these big LLMs. Like we're very much under the mindset that like SLMs, like benchmark-wise, are incredibly more accurate. So I see a similar thing happening with like the training data for the robots.
Yeah, maybe sort of to add what you mentioned earlier about the value of niche data. I think a lot of people maybe get this wrong, and this is not the most like consensus take. I think there's actually plenty of data. A lot of private companies hold more like multiples of data greater than what like GPT-4 or 5 was trained on, and that's like a single company's private database. I think the reality is that there's a lack of quality in niche data in very specific use cases like you mentioned, and I think that's where the next big gap and jump in AI development is going to be.
Awesome. Well, yeah, thank you everyone for coming, and I think that wraps it up for today.
Yeah,
Thank you so
thanks
much.
everyone.
Thank you.